The cold autumn wind swept through Broken Pine, a small frontier town nestled in the rugged heart of Wyoming Territory, 1878. Hope Wilson clutched her thin shawl tightly around her shoulders as her father dragged her toward the dilapidated saloon, her heart pounding with the terrible knowledge of what was about to happen. "Please, Pa, don't do this," she begged, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. The 17 years of her life had been hard, but nothing compared to this final betrayal. Jeremiah Wilson, a man worn down by drink and desperation, didn't even look at his daughter as he pulled her through the swinging doors of the Rusty Nail Saloon. "Shut your mouth, girl. You've been nothing but a burden since your mama died. Time you earned your keep." Hope stumbled inside, the smoky interior momentarily blinding her. Men turned to stare, their eyes lingering too long on her slender frame and golden hair. Though barely 18, she understood precisely what those looks meant. Her father had been threatening this moment for months, ever since the drought had killed their crops and the last of their money had gone to the bottle. At the bar stood Thomas Blackwell, the owner of the saloon and the man who held her father's debts. His greedy eyes lit up as Jeremiah pushed Hope forward. "Here she is, Blackwell, as promised. Now give me what's owed." Blackwell's fat fingers stroked his beard as he examined Hope like she was a horse at auction. "She's skinnier than I expected, Wilson. She's strong enough, works hard, worth more than we agreed." Hope felt bile rise in her throat as Blackwell reached out to touch her cheek. She jerked away, earning a painful grip on her arm from her father. "2 bottles of my finest whiskey, as agreed," Blackwell said, nodding to the barkeeper who produced 2 bottles of amber liquid. "Though I'm being generous considering." Hope watched in horror as her father grabbed the bottles, not even hesitating before he uncorked one and took a long swallow. "She's yours now," he muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Before Hope could process what was happening, a voice cut through the din of the saloon. "I'll give you $20 for the girl." The room fell silent. Every head turned toward a tall figure standing in the corner, partially obscured by shadow. Blackwell's face reddened. "She ain't for sale, stranger. We already got a deal." The man stepped forward into the lamplight. Hope saw a young cowboy, perhaps 25 years old, with intense blue eyes and a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore simple clothes, a worn leather vest over a cotton shirt, dusty trousers, and boots that had seen many miles. The only thing that distinguished him was the quality of his gun belt, worn low on his hips. "25 then," the cowboy said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Her father's eyes widened at the sum. "Now hold on, Blackwell, 30, the cowboy interrupted, pulling out a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Blackwell's face contorted with anger. "Now see here, stranger, the name's Nathan Gray," the cowboy said. "And I'm making a fair offer for something you acquired for the price of 2 bottles of rotgut." Hope stood frozen, unable to comprehend that her life was being bargained for like a piece of livestock. Was this cowboy any better than Blackwell? What would he want from her? $50, Nathan said, placing the coins on the table with a decisive clink. "That's my final offer." The saloon remained deathly quiet. Even the piano player had stopped his tune. Blackwell looked at the money, then at Hope, mental calculations visible on his face. Finally, greed won out. "Fine, take her, but you're making an enemy today, Gray." "Wouldn't be my first," Nathan replied, then turned to Hope's father who was watching with bleary, alcohol-glazed eyes. "As for you, I suggest you leave town before sunrise. If I see your face again, I'll kill you where you stand." The words were delivered without emotion, a simple statement of fact. Hope felt a strange numbness as Nathan approached her. "Miss, if you'll come with me." It wasn't a question, but his voice had softened. With nowhere else to turn and no other options, Hope followed the stranger out of the saloon, aware of the stares following them. The cold night air hit her face, bringing tears to her eyes, or perhaps they'd been there all along. "I don't know what you want from me," she said once they were outside, her voice shaking, "but I won't be anyone's property." Nathan Gray looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the street lanterns. "I don't want anything from you, Miss Wilson. But no man should sell his daughter for whiskey, and no woman should be bought or sold at all." He removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. "I have a room at the boarding house. You can have it tonight. I'll sleep in the stables. Tomorrow, I'll give you enough money to take the stage to Denver. You can start a new life there." Hope stared at him, disbelief warring with desperate hope. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Nathan's eyes seemed to look through her to some distant memory. "Because someone once did something similar for my sister. I'm just passing on the favor." As they walked toward the boarding house, Hope clutched the coat around her shoulders, its warmth and the cowboy's unexpected kindness. The first comfort she'd known in a very long time, the room at Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street of Broken Pine. Hope sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing Nathan's coat, staring at her hands. "There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash," Nathan said, standing awkwardly by the door. "Mrs. Abernathy says she can bring up some food if you're hungry." Hope nodded, though the thought of food made her stomach turn. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for what he had done. "I don't understand why, but thank you." Nathan shifted his weight. "You should get some rest. The stage leaves at 10 tomorrow morning." He placed a small pouch on the dresser. "This should be enough to get you to Denver and keep you for a few weeks while you find work." "I can't take your money," Hope protested. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "There's a decent women's boarding house in Denver on Champa Street. The proprietress is named Mrs. Holloway. Tell her Nathan Gray sent you and she'll help you get settled." Hope looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. He was younger than she initially thought, perhaps only in his early 20s. There was a gentleness in his eyes that contrasted with the hard set of his jaw and the calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "Why are you in Broken Pine?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Just passing through. I've got business further north." Hope wanted to ask more, but Nathan was already turning to leave. "I'll be in the stables if you need anything. Lock the door behind me." After he left, Hope did as instructed, then moved to the washstand. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed her face and hands, as if she could wash away the memory of her father's betrayal. Tears mixed with the water, and soon she was sobbing quietly, shoulders shaking with the weight of all that had happened. When she finally crawled into bed, exhaustion overtook her, and she fell into a restless sleep filled with dreams of her father's face as he accepted those bottles of whiskey, and of a tall cowboy with sad eyes offering her freedom. Morning came too quickly, the sun streaming through the thin curtains. Hope woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then the memories flooded back and she sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss Wilson, it's Nathan Gray." "I've brought some breakfast." Hope hastily smoothed her hair and straightened her dress before opening the door. Nathan stood there holding a tray with coffee, bread, and some eggs. "Mrs. Abernathy insisted," he explained, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "She also sent this." He handed Hope a small bundle, "Some clothes that might fit you better for traveling." Hope accepted the bundle with trembling hands. "Please thank her for me." Nathan nodded, then cleared his throat. "I've secured your ticket on the stage. It leaves in 2 hours. You've been very kind, Mr. Gray. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Live a good life," he said simply. "That's repayment enough." He left her to eat and change, and Hope found herself staring at the door long after he'd gone. There was something about Nathan Gray that intrigued her. Despite his rough exterior, there was a decency about him that she'd rarely encountered. The clothes Mrs. Abernathy had sent, a simple blue dress and a sturdy shawl, fit reasonably well. Hope packed her few possessions in a small sack Nathan had provided, tucked the money pouch into her pocket, and headed downstairs. Nathan was waiting in the lobby, speaking quietly with Mrs. Abernathy, a plump, maternal woman who immediately enveloped Hope in a warm embrace. "You poor dear," she said. Mr. Gray told me what happened. Don't you worry now. Denver is full of opportunities for a young woman like yourself." Hope thanked her, touched by the unexpected kindness from these strangers. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the town of Broken Pine already bustling with activity. As they walked toward the stagecoach office, Hope noticed Nathan scanning the streets, his hand never far from his gun. "Are you expecting trouble?" she asked, just being cautious. Blackwell isn't known for taking losses well. They reached the stagecoach office without incident. The coach was already waiting, the driver loading luggage onto the roof while 4 impatient horses stamped their feet. "Well, Miss Wilson," Nathan said, his voice oddly formal. "I guess this is goodbye." Hope looked up at him, suddenly reluctant to leave. "I don't even know where you're headed." "North to Montana Territory. I have some business with a man there." There was something in his tone that made Hope pause. "What kind of business?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "The kind that's better not discussed with a lady." Before Hope could respond, a shout came from down the street. Thomas Blackwell was striding toward them, flanked by 2 rough-looking men. "Gray," Blackwell bellowed. "You cheated me." Nathan stepped in front of Hope, his hand moving to his gun. "Get on the stage," he told her without turning around. Hope hesitated, fear freezing her in place. "I said get on the stage, Miss Wilson," Nathan repeated, his voice hard. The stagecoach driver, sensing trouble, hurried over. "Miss, you'd best do as he says, quickly now." With a last glance at Nathan's back, Hope allowed the driver to help her into the coach. Inside were an elderly couple and a middle-aged businessman, all watching the confrontation outside with alarm. Through the window, Hope could see Nathan facing Blackwell, his stance relaxed but alert. "I paid fair and square, Blackwell," Nathan was saying, his voice carrying to where Hope sat. "More than fair, considering what you gave for her." "That girl was worth 10 times what you paid," Blackwell snarled. "She was meant for my establishment." "She's not merchandise," Nathan replied, his hand hovering near his gun. "She's a human being." Blackwell laughed harshly. "Look at you playing the hero. You think you're better than the rest of us. We all know what you are, Gray." Hope held her breath as she watched the standoff. The other passengers were pressed against the far side of the coach, trying to distance themselves from the potential violence. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Nathan said, his voice deadly calm. "Take it." Instead, Blackwell nodded to one of his men who reached for his gun. Nathan's draw was lightning fast. A shot rang out and Blackwell's man crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. "Next one won't be so merciful," Nathan warned. "Now back off and let this stage leave." Blackwell's face twisted with rage, but he raised his hands slightly. "This isn't over, Gray. It is for now." The driver, seeing that the immediate danger had passed, climbed up to his seat and flicked the reins. The stagecoach lurched forward, and Hope caught one last glimpse of Nathan standing in the street, watching her depart. As the coach rattled out of town, Hope felt a curious mix of relief and regret. She was free from her father's betrayal and Blackwell's clutches, but she was also leaving behind the mysterious cowboy who had saved her. She wondered if she would ever see Nathan Gray again. The elderly woman seated across from Hope leaned forward with a sympathetic smile. "Are you all right, dear? That looked like quite a confrontation." Hope managed a weak smile in return. "I'm fine, thank you, it's been a difficult day." "Where are you headed?" the woman asked kindly. "Denver," Hope replied. "I'm hoping to start a new life there." The woman patted Hope's hand. "You're young and pretty, I'm sure you'll do well." Hope wasn't so confident, but she nodded politely. As the stagecoach rumbled along the rutted road, she gazed out at the passing landscape. The vast Wyoming prairie stretched to the horizon, golden in the autumn sun. It was beautiful in its way, but all Hope could think about was Nathan Gray's face as he'd stood in the street, a solitary figure becoming smaller with distance. The journey to Denver would take several days, with stops at way stations for fresh horses and meals. Hope settled in for the long trip, her mind filled with uncertainty about the future and questions about the man who had changed her life with a single act of kindness. The stagecoach had traveled only a few hours when the first shot rang out. Hope was jolted from a light doze as the driver shouted and the coach lurched violently to one side. "Road agents," the businessman across from Hope cried, reaching for a small derringer in his coat. The elderly couple huddled together in terror as more shots sounded, accompanied by the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. The stagecoach came to an abrupt halt, throwing the passengers forward. "Everyone stay calm," the businessman advised, though his own voice shook. "Give them what they want and they'll likely leave us unharmed." Hope's heart pounded as rough voices shouted outside. The door was yanked open and a masked man pointed a rifle into the coach. "Out, all of you now," the passengers climbed out one by one, Hope last. Outside, 3 mounted men surrounded the coach, all masked and armed. The driver and shotgun guard had their hands raised, the guard bleeding from a wound in his arm. "Valuables in the hat," one robber demanded, tossing his hat onto the ground. "Money, jewelry, watches, anything worth taking." The elderly couple reluctantly removed their wedding rings while the businessman emptied his wallet. Hope stood frozen, the money pouch Nathan had given her burning against her side where she'd hidden it. "What about you, pretty lady?" A robber dismounted and approached Hope, his eyes lingering on her figure. "Got anything worth taking?" Hope stepped back, fear constricting her throat. "I have nothing," she whispered. The man laughed, reaching out to grab her arm. "I doubt that. Let's have a look." Just then, a single shot echoed across the prairie. One of the mounted robbers cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell from his horse. "Let her go," called a familiar voice. Hope turned to see Nathan Gray approaching on horseback, his rifle aimed steadily at the robbers. "This isn't your business, mister," the man holding Hope snarled. "I'm making it my business," Nathan replied. "Let the lady go and the rest of you can ride away, otherwise the next shot won't be a warning." The robber hesitated, then shoved Hope away from him. "You've made a mistake," he threatened, backing toward his horse. "Not the first time I've heard that," Nathan said dryly. "Now go before I change my mind." The robbers mounted up, including the wounded man who was helped by his companions. They galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Nathan dismounted and approached the stunned passengers. "Is everyone all right?" The driver nodded. "Thanks to you, mister. How'd you happen to be riding this way?" Nathan's eyes found Hope's. "Let's just say I had a feeling this stage might need some protection." Hope stepped forward. "You followed us?" "I figured Blackwell might try something," Nathan admitted. "Seems I was right." The shotgun guard was examining his wound. "Those weren't Blackwell's men, just ordinary road agents." "Maybe," Nathan conceded. "Either way, you folks should get moving. They might come back with reinforcements." The driver frowned at his injured guard. "We're short a man now." "I can ride shotgun to the next station," Nathan offered. The driver accepted gratefully, and soon they were underway again, with Nathan riding alongside the coach, rifle across his lap. At the next way station, a lonely outpost consisting of a small cabin, a stable, and a corral, the passengers disembarked for a meal while fresh horses were hitched to the coach. Hope found Nathan in the stable, tending to his horse. "You didn't have to follow us," she said, watching as he brushed his mount's gleaming coat. Nathan glanced up. "Seemed like the prudent thing to do." "Why do you care what happens to me?" Hope asked, genuinely perplexed. "You've already done more than enough." Nathan's hands stilled. "I told you about my sister. You said someone helped her once. She was in a situation similar to yours." Nathan's voice was tight. "Our father died when we were young, leaving us with our stepfather. He was cruel. When Sarah turned 16, he tried to sell her to a passing trader. A stranger intervened, much as I did for you." He paused, his eyes distant. "I was only 14, too young to stop it myself. I've never forgotten that man's kindness." Hope moved closer. "What happened to your sister?" "She's married now, living in California, happy." A small smile touched his lips. "I make sure of it." "And your stepfather," the smile vanished. "He met with an accident a few years later." The flat tone told Hope all she needed to know. "Is that the kind of business you have in Montana?" she asked quietly. "An accident?" Nathan looked at her sharply. You ask a lot of questions, Miss Wilson. Hope, she corrected. After all you've done, I think you can use my given name. Hope, he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. A call from outside interrupted them. Stage leaves in 5 minutes. Hope hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even herself. I'm not getting on that stage, Nathan frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going to Denver, not yet anyway. She straightened her shoulders. You saved my life twice now. I think the least I can do is make sure you don't get yourself killed in Montana. This isn't a game, Hope, Nathan warned. The man I'm looking for is dangerous, and the man who tried to buy me isn't, she shook her head. I've spent my whole life being told what to do by men. First my father, then nearly Blackwell. I won't let you do the same, even with good intentions. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then unexpectedly laughed. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. Is that a yes? It's a you're making a mistake, but I suspect you'll just follow me anyway if I say no. Hope smiled for what felt like the first time in years. You'd be right about that. Nathan sighed, shaking his head. We'll need to get you a horse and some proper traveling clothes. His eyes swept over her dress. That won't do for the trail. Hope's smile widened. I can ride and I'm tougher than I look. You'd have to be to survive a father like yours. Nathan led his horse from the stall. I still think this is a bad idea. Noted, Hope said, falling into step beside him. But it's my idea, and for once, I'm making my own choices. Outside, the stagecoach driver looked bewildered when Hope informed him she wouldn't be continuing to Denver. Nathan handed the man some money, presumably to cover the cost of her ticket, and asked about purchasing a horse. An hour later, Hope sat atop a sturdy chestnut mare, wearing trousers and a man's shirt purchased from the station keeper's wife. The clothes were too large, but Hope had cinched them with a belt and rolled up the sleeves. She felt strangely liberated in the unfeminine attire. Montana's a long way, Nathan said as they prepared to depart. Last chance to change your mind. Hope looked toward the distant mountains, their peaks already dusted with early snow. I'm not changing my mind. Nathan nodded, resigned yet somehow pleased. Then let's ride. We've got ground to cover before nightfall. As they set off at a steady pace, Hope felt a curious lightness despite the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in her memory, she was making her own path, riding toward danger rather than away from it, with a man who had shown her more kindness in a day than she'd known in years. The mountains loomed before them, vast and indifferent, but Hope faced them without fear. Whatever waited in Montana, she would face it too, alongside Nathan Gray. The first few days of travel were uneventful but grueling. Hope, despite her earlier bravado, found herself aching in places she didn't know could ache. Nathan set a relentless pace, clearly anxious to reach Montana, though he never complained when Hope needed to rest. They made camp each night beneath the stars, Nathan always ensuring Hope had the more comfortable spot near the fire. He was unfailingly polite, maintaining a respectful distance that both reassured and, strangely, disappointed her. On the fourth night, as they sat before the crackling flames, Hope finally gathered the courage to ask what had been on her mind. Who is he, the man in Montana? Nathan was silent for so long that Hope thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. His name is Roland Fitzgerald. He owns a large ranch near Fort Benton. And what did he do to earn your attention? Nathan's eyes reflected the firelight, hard and cold. He killed my friend. Jack was like a brother to me. We rode together for 3 years. I'm sorry, Hope said softly. How did it happen? Jack was sweet on a girl who worked in Fitzgerald's household. Fitzgerald took exception to that. Nathan's hand tightened on his coffee cup. He accused Jack of stealing, had him publicly flogged, then shot him when he tried to escape. The brutality of the story stunned Hope into silence. After a moment, she asked, and you're going to kill him for it? I'm going to see justice done, Nathan corrected. The law won't touch him. He's too powerful, too connected. So you'll be judge and executioner, Nathan looked at her directly. Do you think that's wrong? Hope considered the question carefully. I think violence only leads to more violence, but I also think there are men in this world who deserve punishment. She thought of her father of Blackwell. I don't know what justice looks like anymore. Neither do I, Nathan admitted. I just know I can't let Jack's death go unanswered. Hope moved closer to him, hesitantly placing her hand on his arm. And after, what will you do then? I haven't thought that far ahead, Nathan said, looking down at her hand on his arm. Never seemed important. It is important, Hope insisted. You can't live your life just for revenge. Nathan didn't respond, but he didn't move away from her touch either. They sat in silence until the fire burned low, each lost in their own thoughts. As Hope lay in her bedroll that night, listening to Nathan's steady breathing a few feet away, she wondered what she was doing here, following a man on a mission of vengeance. Yet something told her that Nathan Gray was more than his quest for retribution. There was goodness in him, a capacity for kindness that his hard exterior couldn't fully conceal. With that thought warming her more than the dying embers of the fire, Hope drifted into sleep. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Hope woke to find Nathan already up, brewing coffee over a fresh fire. He looked up as she stirred, offering a rare smile that transformed his serious face. "Sleep well?" he asked, pouring her a cup of the steaming liquid. "Better than I expected," Hope admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "How much further to Fort Benton?" "We should reach it in 3 days if the weather holds." Nathan glanced at the sky, "Though those clouds to the north concern me." Hope followed his gaze and saw dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Storm coming, possibly. We might need to seek shelter if it turns bad." Nathan handed her a piece of jerky and some hardtack. "Not much of a breakfast, I'm afraid." "I've had worse," Hope assured him, thinking of the many mornings she'd gone hungry when her father drank away their food money. They broke camp efficiently and continued their journey. By midday, the clouds had grown more threatening and the wind had picked up, carrying a bite that hadn't been there before. "There's a line shack about 5 miles ahead," Nathan said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Used by cowboys during the winter roundups. Should be empty this time of year." Hope nodded, pulling her jacket tighter. Nathan had purchased it for her at the way station, along with the trousers and shirt. The garment was menswear, too large for her frame but wonderfully warm. They urged their horses to a faster pace, racing the approaching storm. The first fat snowflakes began to fall just as a small cabin came into view, nestled against a stand of pine trees for protection from the wind. Nathan dismounted quickly, helping Hope down before leading both horses to a lean-to shelter attached to the cabin. Inside, the shack was basic but sound, a single room with a small stove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against the wall. "Not exactly luxurious," Nathan commented, stomping snow from his boots, "but it'll keep us dry." Hope was simply relieved to be out of the worsening weather. "It's perfect," she said, removing her damp jacket. Nathan busied himself starting a fire in the stove while Hope explored the cabin. A shelf held some basic provisions: beans, coffee, flour, and salt left by the previous occupants for the next visitors, a common practice in the wilderness. "Looks like we won't go hungry," she observed, taking down the containers. "Good," Nathan replied, feeding small sticks into the growing flame. "That storm's setting in for the night, I reckon." By the time darkness fell, the storm had developed into a full blizzard. Wind howled around the cabin, finding every crack and crevice while snow piled against the single window. Inside, however, the stove radiated welcome heat, and the aroma of beans cooking in a small pot filled the space. They ate their simple meal in companionable silence. Afterward, Nathan produced a deck of cards from his saddlebag. "Know how to play poker?" he asked, shuffling the worn cards with practiced ease. Hope shook her head. "My father never taught me games, said they were a waste of time." "Your father was wrong about a lot of things," Nathan said quietly. "I'll teach you." They sat at the small table and Nathan patiently explained the rules, using beans as betting chips. Hope proved to be a quick study, her face lighting up with delight when she won her first hand. "You're a natural," Nathan said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Got a good poker face." "Is that a compliment?" Hope asked, gathering the cards to shuffle. "Definitely," Nathan affirmed. "Means you're hard to read." Hope dealt the next hand with growing confidence. "My father always said I was like an open book, too emotional, too obvious." "Another thing he was wrong about," Nathan observed, arranging his cards. "There's strength in keeping your thoughts to yourself sometimes." They played for hours, the howling storm outside forgotten as Hope won more often than she lost. She found herself laughing for the first time in recent memory, the weight of her past temporarily lifted by this simple pleasure. Eventually, the fire in the stove burned low, and weariness set in. Nathan stood, stretching his tall frame. "You take the cot," he said, gesturing to the narrow bed. "I'll make do on the floor." Hope looked at the cot, barely wide enough for one person, then at the hard wooden floor. "That doesn't seem fair. You've been riding just as long as I have." "I've slept on worse," Nathan assured her. "Go on." Hope hesitated, then nodded, too tired to argue further. She settled onto the cot while Nathan spread his bedroll near the stove. The cabin had cooled as the fire died down, and Hope shivered despite the blanket. "Are you warm enough?" Nathan asked, noticing her discomfort. "I'm fine," Hope lied, not wanting to complain. Nathan wasn't fooled. He stood, removing his coat from a hook on the wall. "Here," he said, laying it over her. "Extra layer." The gesture touched Hope deeply. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the coat closer. It carried his scent, leather, tobacco, and something uniquely him, for everything. Nathan looked down at her, an unreadable expression on his face. For a moment, Hope thought he might say something more, but he simply nodded and returned to his bedroll. As the storm raged outside, Hope lay awake, listening to Nathan's breathing gradually slow as he fell asleep. She wondered about the man he was hunting, about what would happen when they reached Fort Benton. Would Nathan really kill Fitzgerald, and what then? The questions circled in her mind until finally, exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted into dreams where Nathan Gray smiled at her across a sun-dappled meadow, no vengeance or violence clouding his blue eyes. Morning revealed a world transformed. The blizzard had passed during the night, leaving behind a pristine landscape of white. Hope stood in the doorway of the cabin, marveling at the beauty while Nathan checked on the horses. "We'll need to wait for the snow to soften a bit before moving on," he said, rejoining her. "Probably around midday." Hope nodded, not entirely disappointed at the delay. These days with Nathan had awakened something in her, a feeling she couldn't quite name but didn't want to end. They spent the morning in quiet domesticity, sharing coffee and the last of their hardtack. Nathan taught Hope how to clean his revolver, his hands guiding hers with gentle precision. The intimacy of the lesson wasn't lost on either of them, but neither acknowledged the current of awareness that ran between them. By noon, as Nathan had predicted, the sun had warmed the snow enough to make travel possible. They packed their meager belongings and saddled the horses, leaving the cabin that had sheltered them from the storm. The going was slow, the horses picking their way carefully through the deep snow. Hope noticed that Nathan seemed more vigilant today, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Is something wrong?" she asked after several hours of travel. Nathan frowned slightly. "Just being careful. We're getting closer to Fitzgerald's territory. He has men who patrol these parts." "Would they recognize you?" "Possibly. I've never met Fitzgerald, but I was at Jack's funeral. Some of his men might have been watching." The thought sent a chill through Hope that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Is there another way to Fort Benton?" "None that wouldn't add days to our journey," Nathan replied. "Don't worry. I'm not planning to confront Fitzgerald until I've had a chance to scout his ranch, understand his routine." "That sounds methodical," Hope observed, surprised by his calculated approach. "Did you think I was just going to ride up and challenge him to a gunfight?" Nathan asked with a hint of amusement. "Something like that," Hope admitted. "I'm not a fool, Hope. I want justice, not suicide." They rode on in silence for a while, the snow-covered landscape gradually giving way to rolling hills. By late afternoon, they crested a ridge that offered a sweeping view of a broad valley below. "Fort Benton," Nathan said, pointing to a distant cluster of buildings along a winding river. "And that," he indicated a large property to the east of town, "is Fitzgerald's ranch." Even from a distance, the size of the ranch was impressive, a large main house, several outbuildings and vast fields now covered in snow. A tendril of smoke rose from what must have been the main house's chimney. "What now?" Hope asked, suddenly aware of how real this was. They had reached their destination, and Nathan's moment of reckoning was at hand. "Now we find a place to stay in town while I learn Fitzgerald's habits," Nathan replied. "I need to know when he's vulnerable." The methodical coldness of his planning disturbed Hope. This wasn't the same man who had taught her poker by firelight or covered her with his coat while he slept on a hard floor. "Nathan," she said softly, "are you certain this is what you want?" He looked at her, his expression hardening. "This isn't about what I want, it's about what Jack deserves." Hope wanted to argue, to tell him that vengeance wouldn't bring his friend back, but she held her tongue. Nathan had saved her life, had shown her kindness when she needed it most. She owed him the same courtesy of respecting his choices, even if she disagreed with them. They descended into the valley as the sun began to set, the town of Fort Benton growing larger as they approached. Founded as a fur trading post, the town had grown with the steamboat traffic on the Missouri River, becoming an important supply point for the surrounding territory. "We'll need a story," Nathan said as they neared the town limits. "People will ask questions about a man and woman traveling together." "We could say we're siblings," Hope suggested. Nathan shook his head. "We look nothing alike. Husband and wife would be more believable." Hope felt her cheeks warm at the suggestion. "Husband and wife," she repeated, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "Just for appearance's sake," Nathan clarified quickly. "We'll need to use different names too. Fitzgerald might have people watching for me. What should I call you then?" Hope asked. "James," he decided after a moment's thought. "James Wilson. Might as well keep your last name to make it easier to remember, and I'm—" "Still Hope," Nathan said with a small smile. "No need to change that." They rode into Fort Benton as the lamps were being lit along the main street. The town was larger than Broken Pine, with several saloons, a hotel, various businesses, and a proper church. Despite the recent snowfall, the streets were busy with cowboys, riverboat men, and townspeople going about their evening business. Nathan led them to a modest boarding house on a side street, away from the noisier establishments. The proprietress, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Landry, eyed them suspiciously as Nathan requested a room. "We don't allow unmarried couples to share quarters," she stated firmly. "We're newly wed," Nathan replied smoothly, placing his arm around Hope's shoulders. "Isn't that right, darling?" Hope nodded, trying to look appropriately devoted. "Yes, we've just arrived from Wyoming Territory. My husband is looking for work on one of the ranches." Mrs. Landry's expression softened slightly. "Well, congratulations. I suppose I can give you the room at the end of the hall. It's small but has a decent view of the river." She quoted a reasonable rate, which Nathan paid for a week in advance. As they followed her upstairs, Hope whispered, "What now?" "Now," Nathan murmured back, "we begin to learn everything we can about Roland Fitzgerald." Their room was indeed small, containing just a double bed, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. Hope stood awkwardly in the center of the space after Mrs. Landry left them with a reminder about breakfast being served at 7. "I'll sleep on the floor," Nathan said immediately, setting down their bags. Hope nodded, grateful for his consideration. "What's our plan for tomorrow?" "I'll go into town, listen to the local gossip. Saloons are good places for information." Nathan moved to the window, looking out at the darkening street. "You should stay here, at least initially. The fewer people who see us together, the better." "I'm not going to hide in this room while you do all the work," Hope protested. "I can help gather information too." Nathan turned to face her. "It's too dangerous. If Fitzgerald or his men see you with me, they won't know who you are," Hope interrupted. "That's the point of our disguise, isn't it?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Hope, this isn't a game. These men are killers." "And I'm not a child who needs protection," Hope countered. "I've faced my share of dangerous men, including my own father." They stared at each other for a long moment, neither willing to back down. Finally, Nathan sighed. "Fine, but we move carefully. Together when possible, and you follow my lead without question if trouble arises." "Agreed," Hope nodded, satisfied. "Agreed." The tension between them eased and Nathan's expression softened. "You're probably the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "I'll take that as a compliment," Hope replied with a small smile. It was meant as one. Nathan's gaze held hers for a beat longer than necessary before he looked away. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day." As Hope prepared for bed, she found herself acutely aware of Nathan's presence in the small room. Despite his promise to sleep on the floor, the idea of sharing such an intimate space with him sent a flutter of nervous anticipation through her stomach. When she finally settled under the blankets, leaving Nathan to make his bed on the floor with spare blankets provided by Mrs. Landry, Hope stared at the ceiling, wondering how her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. From being sold by her father for whiskey to playing the role of a newlywed in Montana Territory, all because of the enigmatic man now lying just a few feet away. "Nathan," she whispered into the darkness. "Yes." His voice came back immediately, suggesting he was as awake as she was. "Are you afraid," a pause, "of Fitzgerald?" "No, of what comes after." Hope turned on her side, facing the edge of the bed though she couldn't see him in the darkness. "After you've done what you came to do." The silence stretched so long that Hope thought he might not answer. Finally, his voice came, softer than before. "I used to think there wouldn't be an after, that I'd either succeed and die in the attempt or fail and die anyway." Another pause. "Now I'm not so sure." "What's changed, you?" Nathan said simply. "You've made me think about possibilities I hadn't considered." Hope's heart quickened at his words. "What kind of possibilities?" "A life that isn't defined by vengeance," he admitted. "Something more." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Hope wanted to press further to ask what more might entail, but she sensed Nathan had already revealed more than he intended. "Good night, Nathan," she said instead. "Good night, Hope," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Fort Benton proved to be a town of stark contrasts. The main street boasted solid buildings, a bank, several general stores, and even a small theater, while the side streets revealed more humble dwellings and establishments catering to the less reputable elements of society. Hope and Nathan spent their first day exploring separately. Nathan visited the saloons as planned, while Hope, after some debate, went to the general store and then the small restaurant near the boarding house. Both agreed to listen for any mention of Fitzgerald. They reunited in their room that evening, sharing what they'd learned. Nathan's findings were more substantial. Fitzgerald was indeed a powerful figure in the territory, with connections to the territorial governor and several judges. He employed a small army of cowboys, some with questionable pasts, and was known to deal harshly with anyone who crossed him. "He's hosting a social at his ranch this Saturday," Nathan reported, removing his boots. "Some kind of harvest celebration for the town's elite." Hope, who was sitting on the bed, looked up sharply. That could be an opportunity to get close to him. "My thoughts exactly," Nathan agreed. "The question is how to secure an invitation." "Mrs. Landry mentioned that her niece works as a maid at Fitzgerald's ranch," Hope offered. "She might be able to help." Nathan nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Can you talk to her tomorrow?" "I'll try," Hope promised. "But Nathan, what exactly are you planning to do? You can't just shoot Fitzgerald in the middle of his own party." "No, but I can observe him, learn the layout of his house, identify his security measures." Nathan stretched out on his makeshift bed. "Knowledge is power, Hope." The next few days fell into a pattern. They would separate during the day to gather information, then meet in the evening to share their findings. Hope successfully befriended Mrs. Landry's niece, a timid girl named Lucy who was indeed employed at the Fitzgerald Ranch. "Mr. Fitzgerald is very particular about his guests," Lucy explained when Hope casually brought up the upcoming social. "Everyone must be on the invitation list." "It sounds like quite an event," Hope said, helping Lucy fold laundry in the boarding house kitchen. "My husband and I are new in town. Is there any way newcomers might attend?" Lucy hesitated. "Well, Mrs. Fitzgerald is always looking for new faces at her gatherings. She gets bored with the same people all the time, if you were to call on her and make a good impression." Hope seized the opportunity. "Do you think that would be possible? I'd love to meet her." "I could mention you," Lucy offered. "She sometimes asks me about town gossip." "That would be wonderful," Hope said warmly. "You're so kind, Lucy." When Hope shared this development with Nathan that evening, he was concerned. "It's too risky for you to go to the Fitzgerald Ranch alone." "It's the perfect opportunity," Hope argued. "Mrs. Fitzgerald might issue an invitation if I charm her. Lucy says she's starved for new company." "And what if someone recognizes you from Broken Pine?" "That's highly unlikely," Hope pointed out. "And even if they did, I'm hardly a wanted criminal. I'm just a woman who left a bad situation." Nathan paced the small room. "I don't like it." "You don't have to like it," Hope said firmly. "But it's our best chance to get inside that house." Their argument continued until a compromise was reached. Hope would visit Mrs. Fitzgerald, but Nathan would accompany her to the ranch and wait nearby. If she wasn't back within an hour, he would come looking for her. 2 days later, Hope found herself being shown into an elegant sitting room at the Fitzgerald Ranch. The house was even more impressive up close, a 2-story structure built of stone and timber, with wide verandas and tall windows. Inside, the furnishings were luxurious by frontier standards, speaking of wealth and Eastern tastes. Eleanor Fitzgerald was a slender woman in her 40s, with carefully coiffed hair and a dress that must have come from St. Louis or even Chicago. She regarded Hope with polite curiosity as Lucy made the introductions. "Mrs. Wilson, how delightful to meet a new face," Mrs. Fitzgerald said, gesturing for Hope to sit. "Lucy tells me you and your husband have recently arrived in Fort Benton." "Yes, just last week," Hope confirmed, smoothing her skirts nervously. She was wearing her blue dress, the best thing she owned, though it looked plain compared to her hostess's attire. "My husband is exploring business opportunities in the area." "How interesting. What line of business is he in?" Hope had prepared for this question. "Livestock primarily. He worked on several large ranches in Wyoming Territory." "I see." Mrs. Fitzgerald rang a small bell and a servant appeared with tea. "My husband is always looking for experienced ranch hands, especially those with management potential." The conversation flowed more easily than Hope had expected. Mrs. Fitzgerald was clearly starved for new company and seemed genuinely interested in Hope's fabricated background. Hope was careful to keep her stories vague enough to avoid contradictions while painting a picture of a respectable young couple seeking a fresh start. "You must join us this Saturday for our autumn social," Mrs. Fitzgerald said as the visit drew to a close. "It's nothing elaborate, just a few friends and neighbors enjoying good food and company." "That's very kind," Hope replied, her heart racing with success. "My husband and I would be honored." "Excellent. I'll have Lucy bring you a formal invitation tomorrow, Mrs. Fitzgerald rose, signaling the end of the visit. "It's been a pleasure, Mrs. Wilson. I look forward to meeting your husband." Outside, Nathan was waiting with the horses behind a stand of trees as agreed. His face showed immediate relief when Hope appeared. "Well," he asked as he helped her mount. "We're invited to the social on Saturday," Hope reported triumphantly. "Mrs. Fitzgerald was quite taken with me." Nathan's expression was a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're remarkable, you know that." Hope felt a warm glow at his praise. "I just did what needed to be done." As they rode back to town, Hope described the interior of the house, the number of servants she'd seen, and everything she could remember about the layout. Nathan listened intently, asking occasional questions. "This is valuable information," he said when she finished. But attending the social will be dangerous. Fitzgerald will be surrounded by friends and loyal employees. We're not going to confront him there, Hope reminded him. Just observe, learn. Nathan nodded slowly. We'll need appropriate clothes. I can't show up looking like a trail hand if I'm supposed to be a businessman. Mrs. Landry mentioned a tailor in town, Hope said. We can visit him tomorrow. They spent the next day preparing for their roles. Nathan purchased a decent suit from the tailor, while Hope splurged on fabric to refresh her blue dress with new trim and a matching shawl. By Saturday evening, they were as ready as they could be. Standing before the small mirror in their room, Hope barely recognized herself. She had arranged her hair in a more sophisticated style, borrowing pins from Mrs. Landry, and the alterations to her dress gave it a more current appearance. You look beautiful, Nathan said softly from behind her. Hope turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The suit transformed him, emphasizing his broad shoulders and tall frame. With his hair neatly combed and face freshly shaved, he looked every inch the successful businessman they were pretending to be. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Wilson, she replied, attempting lightness despite the flutter in her stomach. Nathan stepped closer, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. His fingers lingered there, warm through the thin fabric. Hope, he began, his voice low. If anything seems wrong tonight, anything at all, we leave immediately. Promise me. The seriousness in his eyes sobered her. I promise. He nodded, seemingly satisfied, then offered his arm. Shall we, Mrs. Wilson? Hope placed her hand on his arm, acutely aware of the solid strength beneath her fingers. Lead on, husband. The Fitzgerald ranch was ablaze with light as they approached. Lanterns illuminated the path to the house, and through the windows, Hope could see dozens of well-dressed figures moving about. A servant took their horses, and another showed them into the house, where Mrs. Fitzgerald greeted them warmly. Mrs. Wilson, how lovely to see you again, she exclaimed, taking Hope's hands in hers. And this must be your husband. Welcome, Mr. Wilson. Nathan bowed slightly. A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Thank you for including us in your gathering. I'm always delighted to welcome new neighbors, she replied. You must meet my husband. Roland is around here somewhere. She glanced around the crowded room. Hope felt Nathan tense beside her, though his expression remained pleasantly neutral. This was the moment they had been working toward face-to-face with the man Nathan had crossed a territory to kill. Roland Fitzgerald proved to be a barrel-chested man in his 50s, with a florid complexion and piercing gray eyes that missed nothing. When his wife made the introductions, those eyes swept over Nathan with sharp assessment. Wilson, you say, from Wyoming Territory? Fitzgerald's handshake was firm to the point of discomfort. Can't say I recall your name from the ranch circles there. I worked mostly in the eastern part of the territory, Nathan replied smoothly. Small operations, nothing as impressive as what you've built here. Fitzgerald seemed mollified by the compliment. Built it from nothing, I did. 20 years of hard work and smart decisions. He clapped Nathan on the shoulder. Always looking for men who understand the value of both. We should talk business later. As Fitzgerald moved on to other guests, Hope released the breath she'd been holding. He didn't recognize you, she whispered. No reason he should, Nathan murmured back. I never met him before, I only knew Jack's description. His jaw tightened. He matches it perfectly. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Hope and Nathan circulated among the guests, playing their roles while gathering information. Hope charmed the wives of local businessmen, learning which ones had dealings with Fitzgerald, while Nathan engaged the men in discussions about ranching practices and the local economy. All the while, they kept track of Fitzgerald's movements and noted the positions of his men, at least 4 armed cowboys strategically placed around the property, ostensibly as security for the event. It was nearing 11 when disaster struck. Hope was returning from the ladies' withdrawing room when she overheard a conversation from an adjacent hallway. I'm telling you, I've seen that Wilson fellow before, a gruff voice was saying. Can't place where, but it wasn't Wyoming. The boss seems to like him, another voice replied. Says he might have a place for him. Still don't trust him, something about his eyes. Hope quickened her pace, returning to the main room to find Nathan deep in conversation with a banker. She waited impatiently until there was a pause, then touched his arm. Darling, I'm feeling rather tired, she said, forcing a smile. Perhaps we should think about returning to town. Nathan read the warning in her eyes immediately. Of course, my dear. He made their excuses to the banker, then guided Hope toward their hostess to thank her for the evening. They were nearly to the door when a voice called out, "Hold up there, Wilson." Nathan turned slowly to face one of Fitzgerald's men, a scar-faced cowboy with a hand hovering near his gun. Is there a problem? The man approached, eyes narrowed. I've been trying to place you all night. Just remembered where I've seen you before, his voice raised. Boss, this ain't James Wilson. He was at Jack Callahan's funeral in Helena last year, name's Gray Nathan Gray. The room fell silent. Fitzgerald pushed through the crowd, his face darkening with recognition. Gray. The one who's been asking questions about Jack's death. Nathan's hand moved toward his gun, but Hope grabbed his arm. Nathan, no, there are too many. Fitzgerald laughed harshly. Smart woman you've got there, Gray, though I doubt she's really your wife, he signaled to his men. Take him. Everything happened at once. Nathan shoved Hope behind him, drawing his gun in one fluid motion. Fitzgerald's men did the same while the party guests scattered in panic. Everyone stay calm, Nathan commanded, his gun trained on Fitzgerald. I'm not here to hurt anyone but him. You're a fool if you think you're leaving here alive, Fitzgerald sneered. 4 guns against 1. Nathan, please, Hope pleaded from behind him. This isn't the way. For a moment, the outcome hung in the balance, Nathan facing down 4 armed men, determination written on his face. Then, unexpectedly, a leaner Fitzgerald stepped forward. Roland, what is this about? She demanded. What did you do to this man's friend? Fitzgerald's expression faltered. A leaner, go back inside. This is men's business. It's murder business, Nathan said coldly. Your husband had my friend Jack Callahan flogged and shot for daring to court a girl who worked in your household. Alina's face paled. The young man who disappeared last spring, you told me he ran off after stealing from you. He was a thief, Fitzgerald insisted. And worse, trying to seduce an innocent girl under my protection. He loved her, Nathan countered, and she loved him. The only thing he stole was something you thought you owned, a woman's affection. A murmur ran through the remaining guests. Hope could see uncertainty on the faces of Fitzgerald's men as the confrontation took this unexpected turn. Is this true, Roland? Alina asked, her voice shaking. Did you have that boy killed because of jealousy? He was interfering with my household, Fitzgerald growled. The girl was practically a daughter to us. A daughter you wanted for yourself, Nathan accused. Jack told me everything before he died. Alina stepped back from her husband, horror dawning on her face. My God, Roland, what have you become? The moment of distraction was all Nathan needed. In one swift move, he grabbed Hope's hand and pulled her toward the door. Fitzgerald bellowed in rage, and a shot rang out, splintering the doorframe as they burst outside. Run, Nathan urged, pulling Hope toward the stables. Behind them, shouts and confusion erupted from the house. They reached the stables ahead of their pursuers. Nathan quickly saddled their horses while Hope kept watch. What now? She gasped as he helped her mount. We ride hard for town, Nathan replied, swinging into his own saddle. Then decide our next move. They galloped away from the ranch, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. The night was clear and cold, the moon providing enough light to navigate by. Hope's heart pounded with fear and exhilaration as they raced across the open landscape. Why didn't you shoot him? She called to Nathan as they rode. You had the chance. Not with you there, he shouted back. Too dangerous. They reached Fort Benton without incident, but both knew they couldn't stay. Their room at the boarding house would be the first place Fitzgerald's men would look. "We need to keep moving," Nathan said as they collected their few possessions. "Head east, maybe, or north into Canada." Hope paused in her hurried packing. "What about your vengeance? Isn't that why we came all this way?" Nathan looked at her, something new in his expression. "It was. But tonight, when I had the chance, all I could think about was keeping you safe." He shook his head as if surprised by his own revelation. "Jack wouldn't want me to die for his sake, and I don't want to risk your life for my revenge." Hope moved closer to him, her heart racing for a different reason now. "What are you saying, Nathan?" "I'm saying that you've changed everything," he admitted softly, "that I care more about our future than my past." "Our future," Hope repeated, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Nathan reached out, gently touching her cheek. "If you want that too." Hope leaned into his touch. "I do, more than anything." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Hope felt as though she was finally coming home after a long journey, safe, wanted, loved. A knock at the door broke them apart. They froze, Nathan reaching for his gun. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," Mrs. Landry's voice came through the door. "There are men asking for you downstairs." "They don't look friendly." Nathan moved to the window, peering out cautiously. 4 riders in the street, more probably watching the back. "What do we do?" Hope whispered. Nathan thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Mrs. Landry," he called through the door. "Is there another way out of the building?" "The service stairs at the end of the hall lead to the kitchen," she replied. "But hurry. I told them you'd left this morning, but they didn't believe me." "Thank you," Nathan said sincerely. "You're a good woman." They gathered their belongings quickly and slipped into the hallway. The service stairs were narrow and steep, leading to a small kitchen at the rear of the building. From there, they could see the stable where their horses were kept and the 2 men watching it. "We need a diversion," Nathan murmured. As if in answer to his words, a commotion erupted at the front of the boarding house. Mrs. Landry's voice could be heard raised in protest, followed by the sounds of breaking glass and male shouts. "Now," Nathan urged, pulling Hope toward the stable. They had almost reached it when one of the guards spotted them. "There they are," he yelled, drawing his gun. Nathan pushed Hope behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around them. He returned fire, forcing the men to take cover. "Get to the horses," he told Hope. "I'll cover you." "Not without you," she insisted. Nathan smiled grimly. "Together then, on 3. They made a dash for the stable, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. Inside, they quickly saddled their mounts, the horses nervous from the gunfire. "We'll have to ride straight through them," Nathan said, checking his ammunition. "Stay close to me." Hope nodded, her face set with determination. "I'm not afraid." "I know you're not," Nathan replied, admiration clear in his voice. "That's one of the reasons I love you." The words, spoken so simply in such a desperate moment, filled Hope with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I love you too," she said, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. They mounted up and, at Nathan's signal, burst from the stable at full gallop. The suddenness of their appearance seemed to surprise their attackers, whose shots went wide. Nathan fired twice as they rode, not aiming to kill but to force the men to dive for cover. Then they were past the danger, racing through the streets of Fort Benton toward the eastern road. Behind them, more shots were fired, but they were already out of range, their horses eating up the distance with powerful strides. They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Fort Benton. Nathan found a sheltered spot in a stand of cottonwoods where they could rest and plan their next move. "Fitzgerald won't give up easily," he said as they shared the last of their provisions. "He has too much at stake now. It's not just about Jack anymore, it's about what I know." "His wife heard everything," Hope pointed out. "She believed you." "That might work in our favor," Nathan agreed. "If Alina Fitzgerald has any influence, she might convince him to let it go rather than risk further scandal." "Do you think she will?" Nathan shrugged. "Hard to say." She seemed genuinely shocked by the truth about Jack. They fell silent, each lost in thought. The events of the past weeks had changed them both in profound ways. Hope was no longer the frightened girl being sold by her father. She had found courage and purpose she never knew she possessed. And Nathan had begun to move beyond his quest for vengeance, opening himself to the possibility of love and a future. "Where do we go now?" Hope finally asked. Nathan gazed at the horizon, considering. "My sister lives in California, Sacramento. We could head there, start fresh." "California," Hope repeated, imagining the distant place she'd only heard about. "That's a long journey." "It is," Nathan agreed, "but we'd be making it together." He reached for her hand. "If that's what you want." Hope interlaced her fingers with his. "It is." "But Nathan, there's something I need to know." "What's that? Are you truly ready to let go of your vengeance? Can you live with Fitzgerald still out there, unpunished?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I won't lie to you, Hope. Part of me still wants to see him pay for what he did to Jack." He squeezed her hand. "But a larger part wants a future with you more than it wants retribution for the past." Hope studied his face, seeing the truth in his eyes. "Then that's enough for me." They rested until midday, then continued east, planning to circle around Fort Benton and then head west toward the Oregon Trail. It was a longer route to California, but safer than risking another encounter with Fitzgerald and his men. For 3 days they traveled without incident, the vast Montana landscape unfolding around them in autumn splendor. Despite the circumstances of their flight, these were happy days for Hope and Nathan. Free from the immediate pressure of danger, they talked freely, learning each other's histories, dreams, and fears. Hope told Nathan about her mother's death when she was 12, how her father had changed afterward, becoming bitter and turning to drink. Nathan shared stories of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his father's death in a mining accident, and the cruelty of his stepfather that had eventually driven him west. On the 4th day, as they made camp by a small stream, Nathan suddenly became alert, his hand going to his gun. "What is it?" Hope whispered, instantly on guard. "Riders," he replied tersely. "Coming fast." Hope's heart sank. "Fitzgerald's men, maybe." Nathan moved to the horses, quickly tightening their saddles. "We need to move." But it was too late. 5 riders appeared at the edge of the clearing, their guns drawn. Hope recognized one as the scarred man from Fitzgerald's ranch who had identified Nathan. "Well, well," the man called. "Thought you'd given us the slip, didn't you, Gray?" Nathan positioned himself between Hope and the newcomers. "What do you want, Mason? Haven't you boys had enough trouble over Fitzgerald's dirty business?" Mason spat on the ground. "This ain't about Fitzgerald no more. This is personal. You shot my brother back in town." "I winged him," Nathan corrected. "He'll live." "Maybe," Mason acknowledged with a shrug, "but he'll never draw straight again. That's worth something to me." Hope saw Nathan calculating their odds 5 against 1 with her to protect. It wasn't good. "Let the woman go," Nathan said. "She has nothing to do with this." Mason laughed. "Oh, I don't think so. She's coming back with us. Fitzgerald has plans for her. Seems he doesn't appreciate being called out in front of his wife and friends." Hope felt cold fear wash over her. The look in Mason's eyes told her exactly what kind of plans Fitzgerald might have. "That's not happening," Nathan stated flatly, his hand hovering near his gun. "It's 5 guns against 1, Gray," Mason pointed out. "Even you can't like those odds." "Make that 2 guns against 5, came a new voice from behind Mason. Everyone turned to see a lone rider emerging from the trees, a Native American man on a painted horse, a Winchester rifle aimed steadily at Mason's back. "Who the hell are you?" Mason demanded. "A friend of Jack Callahan's," the man replied. "And Nathan Gray's." Hope saw recognition dawn on Nathan's face. Joseph Red Hawk," the man nodded. "It's been a long time, my friend." Mason and his men glanced nervously between Nathan and the newcomer, clearly reassessing their position. "This ain't over, Gray," Mason growled, but the threat in his voice had diminished. "Ride away while you still can," Joseph advised calmly. "Tell Fitzgerald that Nathan Gray has powerful friends. If he pursues this vendetta, he'll regret it." Mason hesitated, then signaled to his men. They backed their horses slowly, keeping their eyes on Nathan and Joseph, before turning and galloping away. Once they were gone, Joseph dismounted and approached Nathan with a smile. They clasped hands warmly. "Your timing is impeccable," Nathan said, "as always." "I was visiting family near Fort Benton when I heard about the commotion at Fitzgerald's ranch," Joseph explained. "It wasn't hard to guess who was involved." Nathan turned to Hope. "Hope, this is Joseph Red Hawk. We served together in the Union Army during the war, and later he was partners with Jack and me in a small gold claim." To Joseph, he added, "This is Hope Wilson." "Your wife?" Joseph asked, noting their body language. "Not yet," Nathan replied with a glance at Hope that made her blush. "But hopefully someday." Joseph nodded approvingly. "She looks like a woman of courage." "You have no idea," Nathan agreed. They built up the fire, and Joseph shared the provisions he had brought: jerked venison, corn cakes, and coffee. As they ate, he explained that he had been tracking Nathan and Hope since they left Fort Benton. "Fitzgerald has put a bounty on your heads," he informed them. $500 for Gray, dead or alive, $200 for the woman, unharmed. Hope shuddered at the implications. Nathan's face darkened with anger. "How many are looking for us?" he asked. "At least 3 separate groups that I know of," Joseph replied. "Plus Mason and his men, they'll be back with reinforcements." "We need to keep moving then," Nathan said, already planning. "Head west as quickly as possible." Joseph shook his head. "The western routes will be watched, but I know another way." He unrolled a small map. "North through Blackfoot Territory, my mother's people, they will help us." "Us?" Hope questioned. "You're coming with us," Joseph smiled. "Jack was my friend too. I have my own score to settle with Fitzgerald. Besides," he added with a glance at Nathan, "someone needs to keep this one out of trouble." Nathan looked at Hope. "It's your decision too. The northern route will be harder, especially with winter coming." Hope considered their options. More bounty hunters behind them, Fitzgerald's men potentially ahead, and now a journey through rugged, unfamiliar territory. Yet looking at Nathan and Joseph, she felt a strange confidence. "I trust you both," she said finally. "And I'm not afraid of hard travel if it means we'll be free in the end." Nathan's eyes filled with pride and something deeper, a love that made Hope's heart swell. "We'll be free," he promised, "and then we'll build that future we've talked about." Joseph nodded with satisfaction. "We should rest tonight and leave at first light. I'll take the first watch." As Joseph moved to the edge of the camp, Nathan drew Hope close, wrapping a blanket around them both. "When I first saw you in that saloon in Broken Pine," he murmured against her hair, "I never imagined we'd end up here." "Nor I," Hope admitted. "But I wouldn't change a thing, not if it meant not finding you." Nathan tipped her face up to his. "When we reach California," he said softly, "will you marry me? For real, not just as a cover story." Hope's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. His kiss was a promise of protection, of devotion, of a future bright with possibilities. As they held each other under the vast Montana sky, Hope marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From being valued at merely 2 bottles of whiskey to finding a love beyond price. It was a transformation she could never have imagined. And as sleep claimed her, safe in Nathan's arms, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, 2 souls who had found in each other the healing they both desperately needed. The journey north through Blackfoot Territory proved as challenging as Joseph had warned. The weather grew colder, the terrain more rugged. But true to his word, Joseph's mother's people offered them shelter and guidance, treating Hope with particular kindness once they understood her story. In a small Blackfoot encampment near the Canadian border, an elder named Standing Feather performed a simple ceremony binding Hope and Nathan as husband and wife. It wasn't legal by white man's law, but to Hope, the promises exchanged under the big Montana sky held more meaning than any formal document. Winter was approaching rapidly, making further travel increasingly dangerous. On Joseph's advice, they decided to remain with the Blackfoot until spring, when they would continue their journey to California. During those winter months, Hope learned the skills of survival from the Blackfoot women, how to prepare hides, preserve meat, and gather the plants that remained available even in the snow. Nathan and Joseph hunted with the men, contributing to the community that had so generously taken them in. It was a time of growth and healing for both Hope and Nathan. The distance from Fitzgerald and the immediate threat he posed allowed them to focus on their relationship, on building a foundation for their future together. Word reached them occasionally through Native American traders Fitzgerald was still offering a bounty, but the amount had decreased, suggesting his determination was waning. More importantly, rumors circulated that Eleanor Fitzgerald had left her husband, returning to her family in St. Louis and taking with her the young woman Jack had loved. "It seems Jack's spirit has found some peace," Joseph observed when he shared this news. Nathan nodded, a weight visibly lifting from his shoulders. Justice comes in unexpected ways sometimes. With spring's arrival came preparations for departure. The Blackfoot provided them with fresh horses, supplies, and maps for the journey ahead. Standing Feather blessed their union once more and presented Hope with a beautifully beaded medicine pouch. "For the child," she said in halting English, placing her hand on Hope's stomach. Hope looked at her in confusion, then understanding dawned. Her monthly cycles had been irregular since leaving Fort Benton, but she had attributed it to the stress of their journey and the change in diet. "Am I?" She began, unable to complete the question. Standing Feather nodded, a gentle smile creasing her weathered face. "New life, strong like mother, brave like father." That night, Hope shared the news with Nathan. His initial shock quickly gave way to joy as he gathered her in his arms, his hand moving reverently to her still flat stomach. "A child," he whispered in wonder. "Our child." The knowledge added urgency to their journey west. They wanted to reach California, to establish a home before the baby arrived in the late summer or early fall. Joseph accompanied them as far as the Idaho Territory, where they parted ways with emotional farewells. He was heading north to visit relatives among the Nez Perce, but promised to find them in California when his travels brought him that way. "Take care of her, my friend," Joseph told Nathan as they clasped hands one last time. "She is a rare woman." "I know," Nathan replied, glancing at Hope with undisguised love. "She saved me in more ways than one." The remainder of their journey passed without major incident. They traveled the well-established trails now, part of the steady stream of settlers moving west. Hope's condition became more evident as the weeks passed, but she remained strong, determined to reach their destination before the baby arrived. Sacramento welcomed them with the bustling energy of a city rapidly growing in the aftermath of the gold rush. Nathan's sister Sarah received them with open arms, her joy at reuniting with her brother multiplied by the news of his marriage and impending fatherhood. With Sarah's help, they established themselves in a small but comfortable house on the outskirts of the city. Nathan found work with a freight company, his knowledge of horses and territory making him a valuable employee. Hope prepared for the baby's arrival, creating a home from the simple beginnings they could afford. On a warm September evening in 1879, their daughter entered the world after a long but uncomplicated labor. They named her Jacqueline Hope Gray, a tribute to Jack Callahan and to the emotion that had sustained them through their journey. As Nathan held his tiny daughter for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, Hope watched with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. "She's perfect," Nathan whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Hope's arms. "Yes, she is," Hope agreed, studying the delicate features that somehow combined the best of both of them. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Hope's shoulders as they marveled at their creation. "Did you ever imagine back in Broken Pine that this would be your life?" Hope leaned into his embrace, remembering that terrible night when her father had dragged her into the Rusty Nail saloon, intent on selling her for 2 bottles of whiskey. How close she had come to a life of degradation and misery. How one man's act of decency had changed everything. "No," she admitted softly. "I couldn't have imagined this. It would have seemed impossible." "Not impossible," Nathan corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple, "just waiting to be found." Hope looked up at him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, who had taught her the meaning of true strength and the healing power of love. "Thank you," she said simply, the words encompassing all that lay between them: the journey, the struggles, the triumph of love over vengeance, the miracle of their child. Nathan's smile held all the warmth of the California sunshine. "No, Hope, thank you. For showing me there was more to life than revenge, for giving me a reason to live rather than just a cause to die for." Little Jacqueline stirred in Hope's arms, her tiny mouth working in sleep. Hope adjusted the blanket around her daughter, marveling at how complete her happiness felt in this moment. Outside their window, the sun was setting on Sacramento, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a fitting backdrop for this new chapter in their lives, a sunset on the past, a promise of dawn yet to come. Hope Wilson Gray, once valued at merely 2 bottles of cheap whiskey, had found a worth beyond measure in the love of a good man and the life they had created together. From the depths of betrayal had risen a love story that would continue to unfold, day by day, year by year, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and its capacity for boundless love. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Hope whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the twisted path that had led her here to this moment, this man, this child, this life. A journey that had begun in desperation had culminated in joy, proving that even in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the frontier, love could take root and flourish against all odds.